Hello and welcome to today's event, Enhanced Visitor Experience or a Partner Profile. Today's event is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to being part of a recorded session, please disconnect your line at this time. The recording will be available at the same location you joined today's event. To learn more about the ways you can participate in today's event, please click on the Messages button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to let us know when you're ready to get started by typing in a message and selecting Send. We encourage you to interact by using the Messages panel at any time to ask questions regarding content or to request support. We will do our best to answer all of your questions. However, due to time constraints, we may be unable to answer all of them during the live event. Your feedback is important, so please take a few minutes to complete a survey that will appear at the end of the event. Thank you in advance for your support. If you experience any technical difficulties, please refresh your browser by pressing Ctrl F5 or the Refresh Now button on the information panel. If this does not resolve the issue, please send in a message and we will be happy to assist. There's also an online test page if you wish to self-support. Simply click the Help button in the Information tab. Now I'd like to introduce your host, Catherine Devine, Global Business Strategy Leader for Libraries and Museums at Microsoft. Catherine, you have the floor.
Great. Thanks so much, Sage. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of the world you're in. I'm delighted to host today's session and really introduce you to an exciting solution, which is from Aura. I first met Atta from Aura Tours, Aura, about 18 months ago, I think it was. It was in Brighton in the Museums Association conference in the UK, and really impressed and inspired by their thinking and their vision, and have been excited to work with them and sort of see them come to market with a solution that I think is really exciting. But the space that we're looking at here is this idea of how can we get out of, creating a visitor experience custom for every museum, and how can we look at something that is natively multi-channel? And so they have even exceeded my expectations in thinking of all the channels that we think about content. But I'm really excited to introduce Atta and his team, and a special guest that we have, Dr. Natalie Lawrence, and look forward to joining at the end for the Q&A and the chat. Thank you. So welcome, Atta.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thanks for having us. Welcome to London virtually. We missed you. We are waiting for you to come here. So, okay, thank you very much. So I'll start by sharing my screen, but Sage, if you can maybe trigger the first question. We're going to start with 6 questions, which will be very interesting and important during the course of my presentation. So if you could start with the first question, please. Okay, maybe we have the results now. So the question was, how many museums are there in the world?
Now, the answer, hi everybody, I'm Costa over at Aura. The correct answer was 55,000 museums. Most of you got that correct. Very well done. Over to the next question.
Okay, so the second question is, what was the global total number of museum visitors in 2019? We didn't want to ask 2020 for the obvious reasons. Let's see if you will know.
Okay, so the results are in for that question. Now, the correct answer is 1 billion. Now, by the looks of it, not one person got that right, which is interesting, and it really shows you really how many people visit museums across the world. Now, let's move on to question 3.
So, social media question. With 1 billion active users, arguably the popular photo platform, social platform right now, how many posts have the hashtag museum? Imagine every museum posted ever combined, plus visitors who posted anything with the hashtag museum, and we're talking about 1 billion users.
Okay, so the results are in for that one. The options were 1.2 million, 4.5 million, 20.7 million, or 25.2 million. Now, since we've got Natalie here as well, I thought we'd ask you as a panelist, because you can't actually answer. What do you think it is out of the options? Would you like me to read them again?
Don't forget to unmute yourself first.
That's put me on the spot. I'm going to go for the highest one, I think.
The highest one?
Yeah.
Ata?
I know the answers. I wrote the question. Okay, we tricked on this one. It's actually 20.7 million, I believe, as of yesterday, which is very surprising. When we found out, we were really surprised because it should have been hundreds of millions, if you think about it, which may give you a clue that these social networks may not be built and designed with museums in mind. So next question, please. This is basically, the next questions are about you. Are you working for a museum?
This poll is really to get an idea of our audience, and afterwards, after the presentation, get an idea of what information we can give you, and make sure that this is a productive session for you as well. Seems like we've got a relatively 50-50 mix. Just over 50% of the attendees are working for a museum.
So the next question is for the 50% of the audience then. Do you have a storytelling solution available in your museum? Which is a multiple choice question. You can select more than one. Do we have the results?
Yes, the results have just come in. There's quite a skew, a mixture. So some of the options were audio guide solutions, official apps, QR codes, other, or no. And there was quite a mix of answers throughout that. So yeah, a lot of different options there. Okay.
Good. So the last question is, when was the last time you paid for content, any kind of content, Netflix, Spotify, or maybe you bought a book? The last time. For me, I think it's today. One of them definitely charged me.
Yeah, my Spotify came through yesterday. Yeah. And the results are in. The majority of people are within this month, with quite a few this week and today, and no one has never paid for content, which is an interesting sign. There you go.
Good. That was the answer we wanted, actually. Okay, thank you very much. That was fun. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to now start sharing my screen. So we're going to discuss an interesting topic, a topic that we think is relevant, especially after the pandemic, because we all have been going through hard times. A lot of the museums had to close. In the UK, they're all closed at the moment. But at some point, we're all going to reopen, and we're going to come back stronger. So then we will have probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years to catch up with. And we think what we're building here globally will be very helpful to museums and experts who work with museums. So we're seeing them as new content platforms. I'll explain what can be done today, and I'll explain the past and future of it as well. Then we're going to have a panel discussion, and we'll make sure we'll have time for questions. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, so we're trying to prepare inspiring presentations for you. So we call it Aura Museum Genius, which is going to be a new way for you to offer advanced visiting experiences to your visitors. So I'll start with the 7th question. So you told us when you paid for any kind of content last time, which is this month, let's say. Do you remember the first time? Go back to your childhood, maybe 70s, 80s, 90s. Was it a book? Was it a vinyl, cassette, VHS, CD, depending on your age? I'll show you mine. It was this, Michael Jackson's Bad Album. I still remember how excited I was. And I remember there was this cassette shop in Istanbul where I was born. And I remember coming back home with excitement. And then I took this cassette and put it in my Walkman, which was state of the art back then. And I listened to this album. Now, the last time I listened to this album was in a different format. It was digital, it was virtual, it was on this platform. So we thought, okay, how did we come from here to here? Basically, what changed and what caused things to change, entire industries to shift? And is it possible to create a similar change in the museum ecosystem? So I'll start by basically giving you a tour of a few decades, and we're going to look at 4 different verticals: navigation, music, films, and art and culture. And we're going to compare the solutions available in that specific time range for connectivity, information capacity, and content capacity. So at first, as you would remember, we were completely offline. We were disconnected. A lot of these solutions, products, were basically fixed. Like they didn't have any way to upgrade, any way to change the content that you buy over time. They worked, but they were disconnected from one another. And they did well for probably 10 years until more digital solutions arrived, and these devices became a little smarter, but technically they needed an even smarter device called PCs to keep them up to date, which worked for a long time. Because now, as these devices got cheaper, different business models emerged. And instead of paper maps, for example, we started using navigation devices. And even though the very first audio guide in the world, I believe, was in the 1950s in the US, however, the majority of the usage got popular in late 80s, 90s, and actually 2000s. But still, they were limited. You would require a computer for updates, and the memory was very limited. So I remember from my past experiences that we had to basically select up to 100 objects with audio guides if we were going to do 10 languages, for example. So all of these changes were happening because of other changes. Let me put it this way. So technology has been evolving, and every new leap in technology enabled new solutions. So right now, I'm living in London. There are some rumors that we've got 5G. I'm not really sure, but it's coming. Let's say we definitely have 3G and 4G. So what this means is, compared to 90s and early 2000s, now we're all connected, and we're always connected with relatively fast connections. and we've got GPS access. So our phones know where they are, which is a very interesting phenomenon, because a lot of the solutions that you see on the left side have turned into services, because now the user already has the hardware. You don't need to sell them or hand them the hardware. So you can see, I guess you see where this is going, that these platforms became giants, and they actually worked in terms of both for the industry that they're serving and also for the end users. And what we're trying to build is, if you remember Spotify when I say music, or if you remember Netflix when I say movies, we want a name for the word museum. So we want to be that platform. We want to. This is a very ambitious goal, I know, but we can do this, and we think it's something the whole ecosystem, the whole industry needs, and I'll explain why in a second. So platforms are good for two reasons. First of all, they are two-sided. On one side, there's the supply. On the other side, there's the demand. For consumers, they offer a one-stop shop experience. Imagine if your favorite artist had their own app, like Madonna has a separate app, Rolling Stones have a separate app, and then Michael Jackson have a separate app, but there's no Spotify, for example. It wouldn't work. So one-stop shop approach is the right approach. They offer easy pricing plans because they can serve to hundreds of millions of people. Therefore, it is now possible to even access these platforms for free if you are happy with viewing some ads. And in my opinion, the most important part is the personalized experience. So because of the abundance of content, it is possible to personalize the experience per user based on the user's needs and behaviors. On the other side, for the content owners, it's a global distribution channel that they don't need to build themselves. Also, a lot of these platforms are offering revenue streams, multiple revenue streams for the content owners, and essentially they are marketing platforms. So again, it would be impossible for any one single artist or filmmaker, or in our case, museum, to build a 100 million people network, but it would be possible for a company like us to build this and offer the services to the museums. So this is what we have built. It's Aura. We're building one single platform for all museums to use. So we're building the global go-to platform for not only museums, but also their visitors as well. What you're looking at is the current version. So you can download this from Apple App Store and Google Play Store. And this is version 1, let's say. We will keep updating these designs because the expectations of the users are changing and the screen size are changing. The hardware is getting smarter, let's say. They're adding new sensors and new features, and the radio is getting faster. So we're going to keep updating this app. It's going to be our, let's say, culture community app. But we started from the most important pain points for the visit phase. And I'll explain very shortly that we've got 3 phases, the pre-visit, visit, and post-visit phase. And this is addressing the middle one, the visit phase, when the user is actually inside your museum. So I've identified a few pain points, which I'll explain now. And this product started with this design. But you can already see that by just pressing one button, this becomes a museum guide for the British Museum. You go back and select Tate Modern. It becomes the museum guide for Tate Modern. And we've got unlimited storage, so we can do a lot of tricks that a conventional audio guide system or anything like that cannot do. So let's go back to the first question I asked. Let's look at the whole ecosystem. Yes, there are 55,000 museums in the world, and these museums are visited by over 1 billion people. This is the 2019 number. We hope 2022 will be similar to this. And we actually expect a very strong comeback from the travel industry. What's actually fascinating is the second line here. Out of the 55,000 museums in the world, 0.02% of them are actually big museums with over 1 million visitors, which is quite shocking because 99.98% of the museums in the world are mid-size at best, like small to mid-size, which means they have limited resources. So what we're thinking is, when building a platform like this, is always, we want to give everyone equal opportunity. We want to give every museum, regardless of its size, the same features for free. So I'll explain how we're doing this, but it's very important. Whenever we add a new feature to the platform, everybody gets it. The US market is interesting because it has the majority of both the number of museums and the number of visitors. And here in London, London is the European capital for museums. We've got over 250 museums here, but ask any Londoner, they cannot name maybe more than 15. So for the majority of the museums in London, discovery is a problem. And we have a plan to address this. What's also interesting is, again, in 2019, there were 21 million tourists in London. But if you only look at the top 6 museums, which are the British Museum, V&A, Tate Modern, Science Museum, Natural History Museum, and National Gallery, they attracted over 30 million visitors, which means a lot of the tourists must have visited more than one museum. But if you ask any one of these museums, they cannot tell you which one these are, because they don't have cross-market data, which is something we will offer as well. This is, again, an interesting map. These are the 1 million plus museums, the big ones. As you can see, they're actually all over the world. So this is a global problem. And you can also see some clusters. Majority of the cities, if they have at least one museum with over 1 million visitors, they got a few. So Washington is one of them, London is one of them, China has a few as well. So you can actually see here, London is very rich when it comes to this. And until COVID, none of these museums actually offered even a registration system or any kind of ticketing system, because it's free to visit museums here in London, especially the public museums. So they didn't have any kind of data of their visitors. So let's look at the current state first. This is how we summarized the problems, and I'm gonna show you the both sides of the equation. So we think museums are great, and we mean it, but visiting is painful. So we have identified the pain points. We think the number one pain point is we don't know where to visit. There are so many options, and we don't even know a lot of the museums that they exist. For instance, this picture is from the British Museum. Next door, there's a museum called Petrie, and Petrie has the second largest Egyptian collection, but a lot of the people, no one knows actually, none of the tourists. So for them, actually, there's 6 million people, or a museum with over 6 million visitors right next door, but they're getting only 100,000. So this is an interesting problem, and it can be solved with technology. Again, these museums are giant in terms of buildings. It's very difficult to find your way inside. And in my opinion, there's enough technology right now to solve this. It's just that the museums need to open their doors to technology companies. Similar problem, huge collections. You may know the top 2, 3, 5 things to see, but there are thousands of objects on display. A lot of collections are available, and you probably have maybe 2, maybe 3 hours. And I'll give you an interesting statistic. Again, with the British Museum, it's an official statistic. About 50% of their visitors never come back, or in a more positive approach, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience to visit the British Museum, which means they have 2 to 3 hours to get the most of it. And it's not easy in these big buildings. Another problem is, because of the lack of space, there's lack of information. You can actually see a few people at the bottom of the photograph kneeling down, looking at something. They're actually reading the instructions for this object, but if you're standing behind them, it's almost impossible to see. And it's a very rare product to find. I'm talking about audio guides, and even if you find them, they're actually years behind of what's currently available because of the reasons I'll explain now. These museums are not tech companies, and we think it's unfair to expect them to innovate like this. because they are museums, not tech companies. Most of you, I'm sure, you would agree that you don't have an internal IT team. You don't have, a rich budget to produce high quality content at scale, because now you are required to create content for this platform, for that platform. Basically, you need an army to serve that. It's actually a difficult operation if you are trying to do this the old way, because you need to employ staff, you need to train them. There are a lot of hardware devices that need to be given, collected, cleaned. Some of them break down, some of them get lost. You need to recharge them. And if you're not at a certain size, you will probably lose money doing this operation. And even if you do everything right, as a museum, you need to find a way to sell, or in this case, rent the solution. So marketing is a problem you need to tackle. An interesting number again from the British Museum is, out of the 6 million visitors, the take-up rate for arguably the best audio guide in the world is only 4%. So we're looking at 250,000 people at maximum. And what about the remaining 96%? They all have phones, but they're, for some reason, and there's some published research on this, but for some reason, they are not renting these devices. We believe one of the major reasons is, yes, there's a queue and you need to wait, but you don't really know what you're buying. So imagine one of these new content platforms, they give you a free trial period, so you kind of know what you're paying for. In this case, in this business model, it's not possible. And here's a mixture of photographs. And I created this slide before COVID, but now I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, will anyone want to touch any one of these? I'm not really sure. So it's going to be challenging. Not to mention the income loss, but again, we're optimistic. We are really bored working from home and staying at home. We want to go back to museums, and it's going to come back. We're 100% confident. So I wanted to add this slide as well, because once you have a relationship with your community digitally, that means you can actually reach them before the visit or even after the visit. So what we're going to experiment in this vertical is, yes, the content and audio guides and video content and navigation tools are nice, but it may be possible to monetize the same audience using other tools or other services. This list can go on and on. You can ask questions. You can get their opinions even before maybe deciding on the next exhibition you want to host. So we want to go to these adjacent areas in the following years. Going back to this, what we're building is a major global platform, and we need you to come join us. What we're going to do is we're going to build the platform so you won't have to. We're going to keep investing in both marketing of the platform and the content production. We've got budget for partnerships, and we're going to keep innovating and adding new features for everyone to use. We just wanted to start with the most obvious ones, like the keypad, the indoor navigation, interactive floor plans, and search. What we did is we actually did all these museums ourselves, and we've created hundreds of exhibits on the system. We have tagged each one of them so you can come up with themed tours, you can personalize your visit. We have even worked with an AI voiceover company. So some of the content that you hear sounds like human, but it's actually using Azure's ML technology for the voiceover. So you can actually create content at scale at a very affordable price. So what we're essentially building is a new kind of content market. And I underline content. I cannot stress this enough. And this is the three-phase approach that we have. In our opinion, the visit starts even before they come to the museum. So what's more important probably from the visit phase is the pre-visit phase, when we're trying to convince the visitors to come to our museum, right? So we have identified that the content that is needed for that phase is actually different. So we need to have video trailers, like informative videos, maybe interviews, articles, blog posts, podcasts, to basically tell the visitor that this is the museum you want to visit, and so that they can discover your museum. The day of the visit is also important. How to get to the museum, which entrance to enter, which tube line to take, and for example, any kind of features of the building, like is there accessibility entrance? Do you have a cloakroom? Do you have a cafe? All of this information will be centralized, and that's what we're trying to build. And if someone likes something that they see in your museum, for instance, the Sutton helmet, we will actually put a button there that's going to send that data to their TV so that they can go back home and watch maybe a documentary about this, which requires a completely different content format on their TVs. So this is, again, as Catherine mentioned, this is a multi-channel approach that you can manage from a single source. So in order to do this, basically, we have started partnering with experts. On the right, you can see Storytellers Community. This is what we call, and this is basically a community of experts that we carefully selected, and Natalie is with us today. So we're going to ask her opinions about this as well. And on the left, you can see the brand we're creating called Aura Originals, so that we can also invest in the content with you, and we can create some original content to be consumed in multiple languages in different parts of the world. And I've also included the steps that we take to create content for any partner museum that we work with. And this is a never-ending process, basically. Once you start publishing, you're going to want to create more content and actually optimize the content you're offering. A little bit technical, but this is what the system currently looks like. So there's a central database, and at the top you can see the CMS, the content management system called Aura Studio, and anything that is published is instantly available on the web, on iOS, Android devices. On the right-hand side, you see rental devices, which can be an iPod Touch or an Android device of your choice, and a web app, which is the newest addition to our lineup. And I want to explain this very briefly, which I think will be, the star of this lineup, because it doesn't require downloads. So we have came up with these smart labels. Right now, we began with QR, but we're adding beacons as well. So when someone actually scans this, actually let me show it here. When someone scans this QR code, it takes them directly to the web app. So they don't need to download any app, because we know a lot of the tourists may not have enough data plans. And it not only takes you to the object page, it also, on the right you can see, it also allows you to monetize this specific visitor. And we're doing this by giving you the daily passes, or in this case, it can be a weekly or annual pass as well, for you to sell. So going back to this, there's a central system, and everything is controlled from a single point of source. And when you change something, when you publish something, it's instantly available. And this is the formula to access 100% of the visitors. On the left, you can see the rental device. The worldwide average is about 4 or 5%. Let's say 10% of the visitors are going to pay for this. In the middle, there's Aura app, which we believe 15 to 20% of your visitors could be power users, so they could be coming with the app installed. And the remaining 70% will probably use the QR codes that will be all around the museum just to scan and listen. So we think if you want to reach 100% of their visitors, this is the formula, and we've got everything ready and working, and we would be very happy to partner with your museum as well. And I found this picture, Catherine would remember. This is from exactly 1 year ago. This is, I believe, Royal Opera House, and I was the guest speaker again in an actual physical event hosted by Microsoft. So we are committed to organizing these physical events in other cities when we are allowed to travel again. So an event in Spain and Italy was scheduled for last year. We're probably going to do it next year, but Microsoft is supporting us big time. Thank you very much, Catherine, one more time. And This is why, because we have built everything on Azure system, the Azure cloud, and we are using some of the more advanced technologies like automatic translations, automatic voiceover creation, and it's in the pipeline. But you can already see that what we have created is running on an infinitely scalable architecture. It is fast and secure, and we're very happy with the support that we're receiving from Microsoft. And if you have any technical questions, I would be very happy to answer as well. Going back, this is, again, Aura Studio, where you can control, you can have the control over your content on your museum and some of the products that we currently offer, which is gonna change as we will keep adding like smartwatch apps and TV apps in the future. So let's talk about the future before we go to the panel section. Content. We're gonna have official content. We start with a few museums in the UK, but what we want is we want to give you the control. We can help you create the content, but you will own the content and you will be able to publish your official content on the platform. We will also have content from experts. These people already work with you, so we want to give them a chance to make money and create a new following as well. We want to have celebrities on the system. We want to have media companies and content creators. These three, they have their own followings, so why not use their own audience to engage? We want to give them their own verified accounts, and these partnerships will one by one happen in the next years. And in a nutshell, we're going to have alternative tones of voice, because some people like academic versions of the content, some people just like the casual 2-minute summaries. We're going to have alternative levels of detail. Especially, we're going to have kids section and parents section in multiple languages. Both the app itself or the entire product line themselves and the content will be available in multiple languages. On the tech side, as I explained, the formula is this. If you want to cover 100% of your visitors, you need to do both rental and bring your own device. And we've got the technology ready right now. We are building, and we're going to keep building with Microsoft. And we're also partnering with other tech companies to offer also new formats. We're not in a hurry for this, but it's going to be very interesting for the pre-visit and post-visit phase to offer 360 videos, for example. And it's going to be interesting to experiment with 3D audio for the visitors during the visit state. And AR is, let me start with that. Probably it's still 2 years away. We need to upgrade our phones, but when it arrives, it's going to arrive big time with 5G, and it's probably going to change the way we interact with the physical world. So in our use case, I can already give you 2 examples. One of them will be basically scanning the artwork. The other one will be using it for the indoor navigation. And social, we are currently working on the next update, which is going to introduce some social features. So you will be able to follow another content creator, or they would be able to follow you as well. This is going to be very interesting, and we're really excited about that. And on the marketing side, we're both going to be marketing the platform and you with online ads, outdoor ads in certain campaigns, partnerships with museums. So we want to be seen inside the museum. And we're going to have in-app ads and very interesting, funny online ads as well, memorable ads, let me say. You can, if you're a museum, if you represent a museum, you can join us for free. It's going to be free forever. You can have your verified account with limited storage. If you want to do more, let us know, because we are offering premium partnership models where you can get, as you can see, unlimited storage, interactive floor plans, discounted access to our community, rental devices, and a revenue share model, which I'm sure you're interested in. And I want to finish with our promise. This is our promise and our mission. We want to make art and culture essentially more accessible for everyone, everywhere. And thank you very much. If you want to contact us, either send us an email at hello@aura.tours, or go to our website, or you can find me or Costa on LinkedIn. or you can reach us through Microsoft. So thank you very much. And I want to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Nellie Lawrence. And as you can see on the right side, we worked with her for covering Natural History Museum. And she's a natural history writer, science presenter, and a private tutor. And she will be joined by Costa Coisi, who's managing our partnerships division. And he's going to talk about how the UK museums approach to this concept and the state of their technology available as well. So thank you very much. Fine.
Thanks, Atta.
Thank you, Atta.
My camera a little bit.
Okay, so Natalie, thanks for being here. So we worked together covering Natural History Museum. So tell us about the challenges first. It's a giant building, and we told you to come up with 100 objects, and you were free to do whatever you want. So tell us about it, and then also talk about the theme tours and how you approached this, how you came up with themes.
So yes, I've worked on both aspects of the content production, both in terms of selecting objects to populate the app with, and in creating tours around the museum. Both of them, it's quite a challenging museum because of its size. It's vast, and it's got collections of lots of different kinds. And it's also, there's multiple layers to the museum as well. So it's not just a museum of natural history. On one level, it's also a museum of history of natural history too. So there's lots of different facets from which you can approach the collections. I do know it quite well because I have worked there, and I've been visiting it since I was a little kid. So I know the building very well. I know the collections very well. And I've also been able to be familiar with the changes they've undergone as well over the past decades. Most recently, the Hinsey Hall renovations, which have been absolutely wonderful. So I suppose in my approach in creating theme tours, I was thinking about the different things that might interest visitors, obviously, but how they could look to see the museum in different ways. So I thought about the different aspects, so the history of the museum itself, and have a tour based on that, linking different collections in an interesting way that would help them see the objects differently, or even playing on other themes like mythology, for example, that you could trace through the museum collections. So it's a bit like a kind of freestyle curation exercise a little bit. And obviously bearing in mind considerations of what's practical, how far people are going to want to walk, how much time they're going to have. And
so what was it challenging to keep it short for every track? Because we wanted you to basically make every track like 90 seconds to 2 minutes, because that's what we measured. But then you need to also stay consistent with the theme. So I'm looking at Myths and Legends, which has got 19 tracks. I think the first one is the introduction track, and then there are some navigation tracks because it's difficult to find these objects in the museum, right? So tell us about the part where you try to summarize the story well.
I suppose it was just about a matter of thinking what was going to grab people's attention most, and also what can I immediately add to this object if someone's looking at something that they might not have otherwise looked at because I've led them there on the tour. What is it about it that's going to surprise them and excite them? So it's that, just putting that primary, I think, and contextualizing it. Why am I getting them to look at it? And I also tried to link objects as well. In between objects, I would try and put a little bit of contextual linking, or get them to look at something on the way, just to kind of enrich the experience as well. So doesn't feel just like a pit stop exercise as well. It feels more like they're traveling through the museum and being aware of what's around them. So the whole experience is more enriching.
So we actually worked with you, and we recorded you. So when someone they can actually listen to your voice on the app. And was this the first time you did this? Do you remember? We were talking about this, I think.
I've been yeah, it's the first time I've done recording of that sort. I've done a couple of radio interviews, but it was definitely the first time I've done any kind of permanent recording like that.
So do you see yourself basically this as your daily business in a few years? Because that's what we're trying to build.
It's definitely something I would enjoy carrying on doing as one of the things that I do, because it links very well into the other work that I do, the writing. It's a personal interest as well, and storytelling and making people excited about these things is something I love doing.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Please keep doing it. We really like your content. So Costa, I think you must have reached over 700 museums in the UK, right?
Nearing on 800. I'm driving them crazy. I think a few of them are attended today.
So, have you noticed any patterns? Like, it's especially when it comes to storytelling technologies that they offer, or what kind of budgets they have, what do they want versus what they can do? Tell us about your experience with the UK museums, please.
Definitely, it's an interesting subject. So, part of my job, and probably my favourite part of my job, is being able to go out across the UK and visit museums. Now, when obviously that hasn't been the case for the last sort of 11 months or so, but during the summer periods when we weren't in lockdown and I could go and visit a few museums, what I saw that was interesting, number one, more with visitor engagement. I'll start off with that. With the way visitors were sort of engaging with the content was totally different to the way it was before. Now, you've got your 2 meter rules, your 1 meter plus rules now, where rather than if someone was standing in front of an object and really absorbing that and enjoying it, rather than somebody standing next to them or sort of standing slightly behind them and sort of peeking over and reading the object description, that doesn't happen anymore. The individual would just straight past rather than wait, which would mean people would miss entire parts of the museum. But the reason I'm saying that, to sort of go back to answering your question, is the way that content is absorbed now is totally different to the way that it used to be. People aren't used to waiting to enjoy content. They're used to just having it straight away. And if, say, a museum 20 years ago wanted to have a state-of-the-art content platform, they'd need to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whereas now, the platforms are readily available. Platforms such as Instagram, such as Twitter to engage with your following, such as Aura to create an equivalent. So when it comes down to what museums are saying to me, a lot of the time it's, okay, we don't have either the time to put content together, or we can't get all of our curators together in one room to agree on how to describe an object, which has been interesting. Some interesting challenges there. But we now live in a world where anybody can be a content creator, and so rather than having to either pay or wait for time or having to get curators all together in one room, it can all be done from either the comfort of your own home, or you can find specialists from all over the world who know about the objects and can create beautiful pieces of content to represent the museum. And whether you want that to have, whether the museum wants to have museum approved content or whether it can be just standard freelance content, it's all there and it's extremely readily available. And I feel like
this is actually interesting because we got Natalie here as well. What we've done with Natalie is her IP, actually. So we're creating this platform for her to use, as well as the museum to use, as well as the visitor to use. So I think over time, museums will have a different or new kind of role in this, maybe some kind of a moderator or a curator type of role, because these exhibits, and I know it's controversial, but these exhibits are there to be displayed, but they are not necessarily owned by the museum in most cases. So they're in public domain, so you can actually talk about this. And what we're trying to give is the platform for both, giving new abilities to share this information from generation to generation, and while also making it profitable for the museum, so they can keep doing this. And I remember speaking with museum executives they sometimes had concerns about, the kind of story to be told officially as a museum, but they are okay if a curator says it or if someone else says it. So I think we're going to open new possibilities which wasn't possible with the museums before, because if it's the official content of the museum, you need to be politically correct in many occasions, which is understandable. But what we're essentially building is an independent platform where we want to give the control to the museums to an extent, but for this they need to sign up and get an account. But ideally, in my personal opinion, if there's 55,000 museums, there are probably 55 million experts from around the globe, and eventually it's going to be the majority of the content creators will be individuals rather than the institutions, which is going to make things very rich. It's going to be different tones of voice, different languages. So thank you very much. Catherine, is she here?
I'm here.
Before, sorry.
Sure, go on.
At one point, and something you mentioned in the presentation, Atta, which is really interesting, is the fact that 99.8% of museums are small or medium sized.
99.98. It's almost all of them.
Yeah. Pushes my point across even further. So with 99.98% of museums being small or medium sized, there's always been that sort of David and Goliath battle between getting visitor attention. So when a tourist comes to London, as you said, everyone wants to visit the British Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum. But the smaller museums aren't heard as much and don't have that same sort of presence. However, when it comes to an online profile, real estate is equal for everyone. So a profile on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or a Google business page is the same no matter how large your business is. Now, what Aura's doing for museums is that exact point. It's allowing small museums to really grab more visitor attention, where in other spaces they wouldn't have been able to physically. But that was just one point I wanted to highlight.
So this is actually a good segue to my questions to Catherine. Catherine, you've been for years talking to very large organizations and also smaller museums as well. And the question is, after COVID, I think we have fast forwarded 10 years in like 12 months in terms of digital adoption. Yeah. Do you think they will change their minds in terms of, the pace of adoption? Is it going to be quicker now that we are kind of comfortable paying for content, comfortable, using these remote conference tools and digital tools?
Yeah, I think all the discussion, we won't know until it actually happens, but I don't think we're going back, right? And I think we've been doing this so long now. It's for most of us, it's coming up on a year with no end in sight, sadly. So it may end up being an 18-month, 2-year type of thing. So those types of behaviors get embedded. But everything that I'm seeing in all industries, including museums, is hybrid, right? Everyone's seeing this as like physical and then plus digital, either working together or working separately. So purely virtual only experiences or purely virtual, expanding on digital. But I think everyone recognizes that we're not going back and that it'll be, but it may not be as extreme as it is right now. Yeah.
What about remote visits or virtual visits? Like, do you think a museum in Tokyo, for instance, take my money as I'm in London? What's the?
I think we're seeing
what do
this
the big
in
museums
other
say to
industries.
you, for example? You're speaking to them as Microsoft, so.
Yeah. I think everyone has been surprised at how large an audience there is once you get outside the physical building and once you open it to the world. And so people will pay for quality, and it's competing with all of the other things that we're looking to do at home at the moment. So I think that museums are recognizing this, whether or not they'll be able to focus on that when they're trying to do physical experiences as well, when the museums are open. It remains to be seen. But I think that there are lots of other, I know that Amazon is not Microsoft, but let me talk about Amazon briefly. Amazon has some great experiences where, you're basically paying to visit another part of the world, and you might pay $50 or something like that. Maybe that's a little too much, but for someone to take you on a personal shopping trip in Tokyo. So these are, I think it's called Amazon Experiences. But anyway, this idea of like visiting, and I've done it, and I'm sure you've all done it as well, visited museums and events all over the world. I think that's here to stay in some format. Yeah.
Yeah, probably it won't be like a 360 video, and if it looks like I'm walking around, probably it's not going to be that, but some sort of remote experience is here to stay. Because we don't have the virtual reality goggles yet. I mean, if we don't have headsets, then we can't consume the content. But at some point, it's probably going to happen as well. What we want to do is we want to be ready by the time that happens. So we want to build the platform for everyone and make it big already for that change to happen. So questions, Costa? Do we have any questions? And unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
So there were a few questions that we answered privately. I've got one here.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to jump in and do my little pitch. So people who know me know that I've been talking platform for years. But what I really like about this is this idea of platform. It's expensive to build this kind of thing custom in a museum, and only the big museums can do it. And even then, right, it's challenging to maintain and fund and everything like this. What museums need to be focused on is the content and the experience, and platform then becomes available to everybody. And also the other side of it is small museums. Small museums have no capacity to build these kinds of things themselves, but equally have compelling content. So this is about access for museums of all sizes, including big museums, because it's a lot of money that can be used elsewhere.
Couldn't agree more.
Costa, any questions?
Yes. So one question was, is Aura available in Europe? There wasn't a specific country, but I'll let Atta answer that question.
Sure. We wanted to focus on the UK market first. So the museums that we will list will be from the UK only, but we will eventually expand to other countries, probably city by city rather than country by country. But yes, basically we wanted to test a few ideas and iterate the design, because this is not something that was done before, so we can't really cheat and copy the design from someone else. We need to basically test ideas and stick with the ones that work. So eventually will be available across the world. Just give it 2 or 3 years.
Okay. Another question is, this was relating to the AI audio. How does it compare to normal audio, or how does it compare to a normal storyteller? What are the main differences?
The main difference is, if you're producing 100 scripts, I think it costs pretty much the same. It's faster, but let's say cost-wise it's the same. But if you're trying to, cover 5,000 objects, there's no way it's even comparable. It's much quicker. You can change it. You can change the gender, the voice type, the accent, and then edit it out, and it's unbelievable. And what else is, you can actually even record somebody's voice and digitize it, and then they don't have to record every time. So you can model somebody's voice. It's Azure Cognitive Speech. So if you're interested, you can take a look as well. But we're going to basically implement it into the platform so that you can just write a script in English. So Azure will translate it to a number of languages and then generate the audio on the fly. And if you really manually tweak, it's impossible to even say that it's not a human.
I can attest to that, actually, because you demoed it to me.
Yeah. I mean, some of the audio recordings. Yeah, some of the audio recordings right now on Aura are made with that. Let's see if we can figure out which ones they are.
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. To me, and that's unusual, because I mean, we've all heard that really robotic voice, so it's really good.
It's learning. It's learning. Over time, I think it's going to be pretty much the only choice that anyone will use.
Yeah. So I think we're at the top of the hour, so we need to wrap up. Yep.
Thank you very much, then. Catherine, for having us. I hope it was informative and inspiring, hopefully.
It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so if anyone wants to follow up, then you can reach out to me directly or find any of us on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. Great. So thank you, Sage. We'll close up now.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please take a few minutes to let us know how we did by completing a short survey that will appear in your browser window once the stream ends. As a reminder, you can access the event recording at the same location you joined today's event. I'd like to extend a thank you to all of our presenters. This concludes today's event. You may now disconnect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.